Hello to tech enthusiasts and everyone around the world who is looking into this masterclass. My name is Fatma Ali, and today I'll be starting off with an HTML masterclass, your gateway to practicing and mastering web development. So let's get started. In today's class, we'll be learning about what's the purpose of the HTML and how we would program our code in HTML and we would see the implementation phase of the HTML by code of how do we do it. Now, the purpose of the HTML is quite simple. HTML is basically a hypertext markup language, which is a stand-up markup language for web pages. It creates a complete website structure for web pages. Hypertext defines the link between the web pages and markup language defines the text documents within the tag. In front of us, we have the structure of HTML clearly to support the argument. We have the doc type HTML indicator, which tells us about the version of the HTML root element, followed by the slash HTML element to conclude the object. So of course, when you have HTML, you will have the starting phase and the ending phase. Similarly, you will have head, which is necessary to be within the document, used to contain the page HTML metadata. And then you will have your title with the slash. So you'll have your opening clause and your closing clause for head and for title. Then you have your body, which will represent the content of the HTML that you'll have, where you have your heading content in the heading tag, your paragraph content in the paragraph tag. Now, in order to implement HTML, there are various ways to do it. You need to look up IDEs. What IDEs does is provide you an ease through which you'll be implementing your code, and therefore will provide you with the efficiency to code well, and you'll also be able to see your results more efficiently. Some of the typical IDEs that we know of, but they're not too unusual, are your Notepad and Notepad++. They allow you to write your code for HTML in any way you like. The downside of this is that you're not too certain about your structure, simply because if you look back, we have our structure in this format, so there are various indentations, various styles. And if you write Notepad and Notepad++, there's no indicator on when my content will start and end. And therefore you also have further setback into providing indentation to your content, which is slightly a little bit more difficult and also quite difficult in terms of documentation. So therefore it will be up to you to provide the indentation and properly structuring your .html file. On the other side, we have some of the most common IDEs that we know of, such as the Visual Studio Code and Sublime Text. Most commonly is the Visual Studio Code being used simply because it has external plugins that we can incorporate. What that will do is it will provide ease in which we will develop our HTML files. Not HTML files, our HTML codes that will then be used to sort of see what our result is. Now remember, HTML is just to define the structure. If we are to define the styling of it, we want color or any of those sort of things, then for that, we will be using CSS. But that's a topic for a different time. Now we've moved to a Visual Studio Code editor. So this is the Visual Studio Code editor that you see here. Now, in order to use it properly, you'll need to open a folder. So for this class, I'll be going ahead using a desktop. Now you will need a new folder for this in order to do your work, but any folder would suffice. For us, we'll be using a masterclass file for this one, just for our case. Even if you're not able to create the folder right now, you can actually create it before opening Visual Studio Code, and then select the folder from here. I will provide you with these. Select the folder. Now I don't need to select anything inside it, just the masterclass will do it fine. Select the folder. Now this is how your editor appears to be. This is for Visual Studio Code which is quite simple. We just have currently opened a Masterclass folder along with some other areas. Now, in order to make sure that we have working with the HTML file, what we need to do is to use a new file. I'll name it as index. Usually, if people want to edit or do something, then index is sort of the typical word to go with, followed by the .html file to provide the extension. And you can see the transition of the symbol. If I were to remove this, it's just reading it as though it's just a general text file. And at the dot, it'll start to recognize that some extension is being provided to the file. So HTML. Once I enter this, it saves the file. And now here you have your index.html file, which will be used for creating the website. Now, in order to start off with things, I'll be starting off with the exclamation symbol. Now, your Visual Studio Code is very versatile in this case that instead of typing the structure that we saw in the lecture from scratch, the doc type, and then ensuring that your doc type is within the right, let's say the format, the capital case, the uppercase, lowercase. Instead of doing that, going to the nooks of it, what we can do is use the Visual Studio Code to provide ease. So what do we need to do is simply, I'll use Shift +1 combination. It will give me an exclamation mark. And now I have two options here, a single exclamation part and 3 exclamations. For this case, I'll just be using 1 exclamation symbol. And what that will do is it will automatically open the code format that we saw within our lecture slides. So you can clearly see our doc type HTML format, the language being in English, along with the head and the body. Now, if I were to run this, I'd be using one of the extensions that are pre-customary, is the live server. Now, live server is quite unique. So what this will do is, instead of going back and forth, in your typical Notepad file where you Control S and then you'd go to your your Internet Explorer or your Edge or any website sort of explorer that you want to open. What this will do is that once you save your code, you can go back to your Chrome or Edge, and you'll see that whatever changes you've done will be deployed there. Live server provides that ease instead of you typically saving the file, closing it, and then opening it over there or constantly refreshing it. What this will do is that it sort of lives it up. So whatever changes you do within the code get automatically summoned onto the website. I'll show you how. So for instance, I go with website title 1, just a general one. We'll come to the body a little bit later. And now I click on this go live symbol. We'll start. And now it's opened it up. Now you can clearly see, because I didn't mention much in the body, the title was mentioned. So you can see the title over here as website title 1, which is quite interesting, which is per normal. Now, we do have our body here, and I want to do is sort of explore some of the header symbols over here. Now remember, for header symbols, you have range from H1 to H6. These are your general headers that you will be going with. And most of these are in the form of descending order of height. If I go for 1, I tap this, it'll create the automatic extension here. So that will leave me, so this provides a bit of an error-free area where in case if I miss the /h1, then it will cause an error. So what VS Code does is that once I give the closing quotation, the less than symbol, it will automatically give me the less than h1 symbol. Now let's just copy this. This is just a typical, displaying of how the etch symbols work precisely. Now, you might see that nothing much has happened, although I said that once you give the go live and make the changes will reflect to the Explorer. In order to make that happen, I'll need to Control S this. This will save the file, and then it will reflect it on the website. So I Control S this, and you can see H1 is being the highest, and as we go down, it will come up in the lowest of settings. We will be exploring more on the H files and also on the paragraph files, but for now, this would be more than this is more of the intel to provide regarding HTML. We will be going further and breaking it down further to provide more easiness to this. This is just touching the surface of HTML. The more we go further, the more we'll understand about how HTML works. I hope you enjoyed today's session, and we'll continue with the next class. Thank you.